Forgiving your enemies. Welcome to you. And these are some thoughts which came to me following a recording I did Friday the 13th. I was aware at the time I was doing it that it was somewhat disjointed and maybe didn't seem to make a great deal of sense to you. And these are some thoughts I've had since then, which you might find even more confusing, but I offer no apology, really. Well, I do, but really what I'm trying to share with you is some of my thought patterns and some views that I've had. But after I did that recording, I realised almost immediately that I admitted to discuss how it is that maybe, and these are all maybes, but how maybe we shape our enemies. And what I mean by this is that, and you may know, I don't particularly like to use the word evil, but throughout this particular vlog, I think the word evil is somewhat appropriate. That the evil in the universe is actually the evil within us. Now, I've talked many times about my daily jihad, but that's what it's about. It's about looking for the evil within me and trying to understand it and to root it out with goodness. I also, in that Friday the 13th, described my theory of avatars. These are sort of people who've, through their own free will, given up their will to the will of others. So people who act in ways without thinking, particularly if they're sort of dominated by fear or greed or something like that. And what I questioned in Friday the 13th was maybe that we are all, well, I do say that we are all at times avatars. It's not something that some people are avatars and some aren't. All of us can become avatars. But that maybe if we have this sort of multiple universes idea, that we're all avatars in some universes. And that would put a very different perspective between yourself and your enemies. But what I missed to say was that a further thought is that we create our enemies and their behaviour based on our own fears and insecurities. So in other words, how people that you perceive you're in conflict with are behaving only represents your fears of them. So I'm sure you've experienced, like me, there are times when you say to yourself, I know what they're going to do. They're going to do this. And it happens, particularly when it's a bad thought. I used to spend a lot of time in Vietnam, and whenever I got a taxi from the airport in Saigon, I think it's changed now, I think there's a new airport, but whenever I got a taxi from the old airport, the driver would turn round to me and say $10. Now $10 was maybe not 10 times over the price if you paid in Vietnamese dong, but certainly getting on for 10 times more than the true cost. And the only English they seemed to have was $10. So no matter what I said to them, they just kept saying $10. And it was a self-fulfilling prophecy. Every time I landed, I thought to myself, the taxi driver's going to say $10 and I'm going to get angry, and that there's no point in getting angry. There really isn't. But, it's something I'd wished on myself. So it's really that I'm talking about. So following on from this thought that we create our enemies and their behaviour, we can't truly release ourselves from them, despite me having despite me having done a vlog on how we release ourselves from our enemies, but to truly release ourselves, we can't do that without exploring our own darkness, because it's our darkness that's creating them. So we have to forgive and love ourselves, and only then can we truly release our enemies. So I had a revelation, but I need to tell you about my revelations before I describe the actual revelation. I've already spoken about there being 7 veils of Kajalan, and how I'm really stuck between the one that deals with somewhat of paranormal explanations and the veil that all is consciousness, the veil that we create everything, which I've just alluded to. And I try to explain this, that our consciousness is linked to all living things, also all inanimate things, also all paranormal entities. And although I'm somewhat convinced by this, I have to say I've never found it totally convincing. And at the heart of my dilemma is that I cannot resolve my own thoughts without my ego coming back in to distract me. Well, yesterday I had a further revelation. Now, what I don't want to say is that this is a complete answer. Indeed, maybe my quest for a theory of everything is illusionary. We will never arrive at everything. It's all a journey to bring us closer to God, to true understanding. But I did want to share with you this revelation. And now remember, there are 7 veils of Kajalan, and that each one contradicts the last. So don't get hung up on me contradicting what I previously said. It's something I do all the time, and if I'm on a quest for understanding, becoming closer to God, then there will be contradictions along the way, and I'm merely sharing with you a vignette of where I'm at the moment. All of these veils are simply devices to understand, to understand about the universe and life, which maybe is unfathomable, along with God and God's prerogative. But the thing about what I'm going to talk about is maybe it'll be of use to you in releasing your enemies. So that's why I'm recording this. Now I'm sure you're all crying out now, well, what was this revelation? What was this breakthrough? And believe me, I'm getting to it. Now remember, I'd said that previously I'd thought that all consciousnesses are linked. I sometimes conceptualise this, that we're a sort of a green goo in a jam jar that's linked by wires to all other jam jars. So our consciousness is linked to everything. But my revelation was that we're not individuals at all. They aren't individual jam jars, if you like. This is the ego tricking us, that we have an individual consciousness, an identity. So the question I pose is, could it be that we're all one? That we're everything within the universe? This would mean that we truly are built in God's image. And you'll have probably heard it before, but very fitting now, as above, so below. That we are every human, we are every plant, we are every animal, every stone, every tree, every spirit within the universe. But perhaps more importantly, that every human, every animal, every plant, every tree, every stone, every spirit is also us. So if this is true, we're our own enemies. Not simply that we create them, as I'd said at the beginning, but we actually are them. And therefore, we're also created by them. Now this would explain those differences of opinion you have with your enemies when you look at your perspectives on a particular event. Putting a new perspective on what is often said to harm others is to harm ourselves. And also a new perspective on that the universe uses karma to create balance. Now, of course, this means that my daily jihad is crucial, because we not only need to dissolve the ego, and with it the fear and the evil that is within us. So the jihad is more than my daily battle against evil. It's my daily battle with the ego, with the idea, the concept of the individual. Repeatedly I've said that we must stop seeing our problems as external to us. But of course this new thought gives that an entirely new poignancy. As everything resides in our consciousness, which is a universal consciousness. So it's not simply our consciousness, it's a universal consciousness, not a linked consciousness, but a completely universal consciousness. And I have hinted at that before. There's a vlog on finding the universal consciousness. Now, I've also shared with you that I've been a victim of psychopathic abuse. In fact, I was a victim for some 20 years, and if you understand that I'm still sort of working through it, then that's some 30 years of my life that has been dominated by it. But if I look really throughout my life, I can see how my life has been shaped by narcissistic abuse and narcissistic manipulation. Throughout my entire life, if I look at my career, I kept coming across corporate sociopaths, and they had a great influence on me. Now this all accumulated into my family and I suffering from black magic. But had I not suffered from that black magic, then I'd have never taken an interest in any of these things. I considered myself a Western scientist. I had no comprehension of any of this. So I'd have never started this exploration that I'm currently on, and probably will be on for the rest of my life now. So this new thinking would suggest that this abuse and this manipulation simply reflects my own fears, simply reflects a darkness that's within me. Now, I've talked about finding a light of pure bliss and love, and I hypothesize that this is the way to rid the universe of evil. Indeed, during my meditations, I get very strong messages that that's correct. Well, if we are everything and everything is us, then the light is the only way to resolve the human condition, because we need to turn the light upon ourselves. So the darkness or the evil truly is a lack of light. And it's this evil that keeps us from finding ourselves and becoming a one with God. But of course now I'm saying that this evil truly is us. It is within us. You can't externalize it. You have to confront it within yourself. Now, I get asked to help people. I help a lot of people in Java, but sometimes I'm asked to help people internationally. And I'm helping a lady in the UK whose husband has said that he no longer wants her. And slowly I'm beginning to understand things. The immediate thing to think is that he's got somebody else, and there may be somebody else there, but that's not the motivation. The motivation would seem to be greed and money. He seems to have been overcome by greed and money. So that's why I say, love means nothing to him. The only thing he has love for is a love of money. It's the only thing that matters to him. So the same goes for religion. His God is money. Now, I'm able to understand this because that's exactly what happened to me. It's what happened to me as I embarked on that 20 years of psychopathic abuse. So I've got a great understanding of that process and what's happened. It's this money, this greed, this ego that prevents us from finding the light. So forgiveness goes way beyond accepting some responsibility for your own actions and what has happened to you in your life, and in truly forgiving ourselves. Beyond even loving everyone and everything, because it's actually to see this love as being everything. Love truly is the answer to all things, and when you've got this light and understood this love, then nothing else can matter. Now, you'll also have heard me arguing that karma is the universe's mechanism for creating balance. That every action, and I mean every action, has an equal and opposite reaction. Now, the universe increases entropy. That is complexity or chaos. That is how the universe works. Or that's how scientists tell us the universe works. And at times I hypothesize that our role is to reduce this empathy. And it seems to me that the only way we could reduce entropy is via love. Now, traditionally that's something of a tautology. Because traditionally it's believed that the entropy cannot be reduced. Because if we destroy entropy, or reduce entropy, we destroy some knowledge. Because knowledge is creating a complexity. And therefore, if we did manage to find a way of reducing entropy, how would we know about it? Because we would have lost knowledge. Now, it's interesting because you'll hear me argue that time is a human constraint, and time doesn't really appear in physics, but the one place that it really does appear is when we talk of entropy, because there has to be a timeline. If entropy is increasing, then there has to be a concept of time. But as I've already argued, time is simply a human construct and a human constraint. So, if knowledge increases complexity and therefore entropy, could knowledge be actually the opposite of what we believe it to be? That what we think of as knowledge actually takes us away from the simplicity of God's creation and how God wants us to live with each other. Further and further away from the light and the love. So knowledge is the opposite of true understanding. Now, this is a part of the hegemony which I speak of, which prevents us from experiencing God's love, because it promotes the ego and the belief in the individual. So the more science, if you like, but I mean all human knowledge really, the more science, human knowledge we have, the more the cult of the individual, and therefore the more the ego is promoted, which takes us further and further away from God's intention. Now this would seem to link into the idea that karma seeks to balance the universe. So what are the implications of this revelation? Well, of course, they're absolutely immense. It would explain why we can only release our enemies through love. Because it is this battle between good and evil within us, this thing that I call my daily jihad. Now, in the Friday the 13th blog, I suggested that maybe the Day of Judgment would come if we could resolve all of our own avatars. In other, resolve those in every universe. But this takes us back to the idea that the Day of Judgment can only come when we resolve and reunite ourselves with everything, with the universe and with God. Maybe I've lost you. Now remember, these are only some thoughts. But if you can suppress the ego, maybe it will make sense. And perhaps such thoughts are so important and timely right now, because entropy and complexity are increasing at an alarming rate at the moment. But maybe karma will see the universe rebalancing. And this could be a time of spiritual renewal for us all. A spiritual renewal based on feelings and what we thought was knowledge. I hope you can join me. Well, I really hope you've enjoyed this. Because these are real events, I can't say how regularly I'm going to be adding to this subsection. Because I don't know how often they're going to occur. But I would imagine that they'll be at least every couple of months, maybe monthly. Now, if you'd like to know when that's going to be, please subscribe and hit the button, and you'll get information on when new ones are released. I'd love you to make comments and ask questions, and if you do, I'll attempt to answer them as honestly as I can. I promise you that there's no attempt on this channel or this part of this channel of me. There'll be no attempt by me at any type of subterfuge. I'll try to be as honest and open as I possibly can be. Inevitably, there will be some of you who disagree with my interpretation, and we can agree to disagree. But what you're seeing is real stuff here. What I'd love you to do, if you enjoyed this, is look at my other sections. Particularly, I've written novels about magic in Java, and they contain much more information in them, especially me trying to understand the theories of magic, the psychology of it, and I try and intersperse them with a sort of spiritual dimension. Anyway, thank you so much for watching, and God bless you.